Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. It's almost Christmas. Just a few more days to wait. Norwich City also back in action on Boxing Day as well. The trip to Kenilworth Road, closest away game. So there's a plus in that one, Connor. To start off the show, feels like there's only really one place to start. A certain man in the head coach role at Norwich City Football Club, Dean Smith. It feels like football this week has been very much centred around Dean Smith and those post-match comments after the game against Blackburn, a very turgid, horrible performance. And there's been a silence from the football club for basically a whole week now. We then see Dean Smith this morning. You were there in the room like myself. So I just want to get your take on the past week, Connor, those post-match comments. And then this morning you were there. You saw his kind of body language. You heard what he had to say. So what did you make of it? And where did Norwich City go from here in terms of Dean Smith?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting week. I've found myself doing a lot of listening, doing a lot of reading, listening to opinions, taking in opinions across the spectrum that various people have had. And so in that regard, it's been really interesting. I felt, and I think I said this in my video verdict, which people can go back and watch on YouTube, that I felt that we pretty much would be here come Friday, that we would be in a situation where he was again addressing questions and speaking about some of the stuff that he said and what happened. And so on a very human level, I feel sorry for him that maybe there hasn't been another person that's come out and spoken a little bit. Although, again, I understand maybe why that isn't the case, because as soon as you put someone up, Stuart Webber, Neil Adams, whoever you want to put up, it gets perceived to be this vote of confidence that nobody really wants to give or to receive. So in many ways, I understand why it's been the way it has been. But it's been really interesting to look and listen, but also to see how Dean Smith has responded to it. It was a very, I don't know if combative's the right word, but he certainly came out swinging. I kind of described it to Paddy as it being like a batsman in a cricket game where they've already lost 9 wickets. The run total that they're chasing seems absolutely insurmountable, but because of that situation, they try and come out and start playing some sixes, and either you get caught or you get bowled, right? Or sometimes you can even hit a 6. And that's kind of where I see that we are at this moment in time, because in many aspects, whatever he said in this setting or in any setting was going to be very difficult to get supporters to agree with him or be on side of him or even understand where he was coming from, I think. I did feel, and actually we said this when we walked away, that he did answer questions and he was honest. That being said, I think having watched it back, there are a few comments that will be taken by supporters and little sound bites that will be used and taken negatively. But that is probably a culmination of the situation that he finds himself in. And in many ways, I feel sorry for him on a human level that he's having to go through it. And, because you can debate whether or not he should be in the position he's in. But for someone who, in my experiences of him as a human being, and that's completely separate to obviously the whole debate, of course it is, but he's a very pleasant individual. And so it is difficult, I think, to remove that. But by the same token, when you look at his record and he wants to be judged by his record, in the 13 months that he's been in charge with Norwich City, there's been very little for supporters to cling on to. So I can understand why they're feeling the way that a lot of them are feeling. And I also think some of them have had to absorb blame that maybe they feel is unfair, in the same way that Dean Smith feels that some of the blame is unfair. So really intriguing situation. At the moment, you've got two things at odds. At some point when that happens, something has to give. For me now, it's a case of what gives and what happens from here. But it was an interesting press conference. I'm sure you'll agree, and other people will agree. And I would encourage everyone to go and watch it. It's available on our YouTube channel. 15 minutes of it, of Paddy speaking to Dean this morning. It's well worth a watch. All of the context and all of the stuff that maybe we get accused of lacking at points is in there. So go and view it for yourself and make your own opinions would be my judgment, I suppose.
Yeah, they're going to give people a little tiny snippet. Just going to play a piece of the press conference from this morning, Connor, and then we'll delve into the Luton game and Dean Smith.
Obviously, we just have a footnote on the Blackburn game for obvious reasons. Off the pitch as well as on it. It was a difficult night, but how do you process it? And is it tougher to just shut it down, deal with it, move on when you've had that kind of situation to deal with in terms of fan reaction?
I think you have to process it. I've said many times since I've come here, I'm in a privileged position of being the head coach of Norwich City, and never ever took that for granted. You know, and I believe I'm good at my job. Yet the reaction wasn't great, but my intent has never been to drive a wedge between myself and the fans. It's always been to try and bring us together. And I just felt, you know, after 12 minutes of the game, I thought that was tough. And listen, I understand I haven't got the credit in the bank that a lot of the players have got, but some of the players were getting stick that early in the game. I think I've looked back on the stats, and at half time, Blackburn's expected goals was 0.01. We've conceded a goal to an own goal. So I just feel, and I'll always feel, I'm not a punch bag. I feel that I have a right to defend them players. You know, there was never any intent in my comments after the game, because the be all and end all is we need the fans. We all need to be together to get ultimately what we want to be is a promoted team that can go and stay in the Premier League, and I still firmly believe we can go and do that.
Yeah, he just spoke about the need for the fans there, Connor. He said, you know, he's not trying to drive a wedge between them. There does feel like there's a bit of a disconnect between the fans and the club at the moment. Dean Smith obviously in the middle of that as well. So is there a way back for him now? We spoke about it on the podcast. There's been a week now. There's probably a lot of fans felt that he maybe needed to go after that Blackburn game. There's obviously a clear focus, I think, from the club maybe that he's going to be the man moving forwards, certainly for the short term. So what does he need to do at Luton? Do Norwich need a really good performance, a win, or do you think this is sort of non-repairable now? You know, is Dean Smith's days at Norwich City's numbered?
Yeah, see, it's tough because obviously they need a win first and foremost, because the narrative is set. I think if they don't win at Luton, then you just open yourselves up to more criticism, more kind of the stuff that we've seen this week. But then even if they win at Luton, if they come back to Carrow Road against Reading and they concede after 5 minutes, then you kind of get to where we were before. So in many ways, in that sense, and I've asked myself this question a lot this week, is this repairable? Is this retrievable? And increasingly, it doesn't feel like it is. And what I mean by that is it's not me saying that he needs to go or whatever. It's just me merely saying, as I said, when you've got the fan base and Dean Smith or a football club or whatever in conflict, in contrasting views, having little snipes at each other, whether that be through chants or through comments in the media, there's only one winner in the long term, and that's the supporters, in my view. So I think it's a very difficult road to go down. And I also don't really understand this narrative of that the players were being criticised, because I was there at Carrow Road last weekend. What I saw, to be honest, and obviously I can't speak for everyone that was booing. Only the people who were booing can tell you exactly what they were booing at. But I didn't perceive it to be fans booing because Norwich City were passing the ball around the back, because they've done that for 4 years very successfully. And no one was really moaning. There were little points. I remember a Swansea game in a season. I think Stuart Webber commented publicly on that, where there was a little bit of frustration. But by and large, across that 4-year spell, they were very accepting of a team passing around the back. So I don't really buy that was what they were booing. I think what they were booing was the structural issues, the lack of midfield options, the lack of progressive passing options higher up the pitch. So again, inadvertently, they're not booing the players, they're booing Dean Smith and the structure and the coaching of the side. That was my reading on it at the time. So I'm not really sure where this narrative of it has arrived of the players were being criticised. I sat and I watched after the full-time whistle, the handful of players that did go round Carrow Road and clap the supporters. They were being clapped back. They weren't being booed. They weren't being told where to go. It wasn't chance directed at the players. So I don't really buy that argument, if I'm completely honest. And again, and this shows how statistics can be twisted into whatever you want, because he spoke about the XG that Blackburn had. Fine, but then they scored a goal after 3 minutes, so they didn't need to attack. The onus was on Norwich City. It goes back to this kind of game state thing that we spoke about so much in the podcast and that I've been speaking about as well, because if Blackburn scored on the road, they were happy with that. They were happy to contain and sit and frustrate Norwich. That was a tactical plan. So this idea that they had low amount of XG, therefore Norwich City dominated and the performance wasn't as bad as people are making out, I don't really buy, if I'm completely honest. So, yeah, it's just unsustainable, isn't it? We can't go on like this. And either Dean Smith and Norwich City win football matches, and they win enough football matches to change opinions. And let's be honest, they had a run earlier on in the season where they did that, won football matches, and I don't necessarily think they did change opinions in that time. I still think there were concerns and worries that we may well end up at this point in the future. So I'm not even sure that simply winning football matches is enough anymore. And this is where I come back to that question, is this retrievable? To me, it doesn't feel like it is. It certainly would be the first time I've seen it in a Norwich City perspective for a manager to come back from the position that they currently find themselves in. And also, again, I've mentioned human level quite a lot. It's not nice to see him go through this because, as we've said, he's a very nice individual. So it's for me quite sad that he is being put in a position where this criticism is constant. And it's a difficult one. I just don't feel that it is sustainable at this point. I want to be proven wrong. He said he wants to prove people wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong, and I'd love it to be really successful and for Norwich City to end this season getting promoted. But for me, in order to be successful, you have to be together. And at the moment, this football club is not together. And therefore, and we delved into this in the pod, you can remove the head coach from that situation. I don't necessarily believe it's a silver bullet and it fixes everything, but it does buy you a bit of time. It does bring in some connection, and it does show that you're at least willing to try and change things. And that's probably where the frustrations are at this moment in time. So if it is going to be a way back for him, it's going to be a very, very long road back. And it's going to have to be a lot of wins and a lot of points accrued in that time, something that his Norwich City team simply haven't done in his 13 months in charge. So it's difficult to see that, if I'm completely honest, whether you use statistics, the eye test, or whatever you want to use to come to that thing. It's very hard beyond hope to construct any argument that there is going to be a major uplift in performance. But at the same token, it's not impossible. So and he has to believe that. He has to believe that whilst he's in post, he is able to do it, and he is the man to do it. My final point, because I know I'm waffling a little bit, is this is a really nuanced and complicated debate. I think people can think, and this is probably the camp that I'm in, you can think that Dean Smith is a very good coach with a very good track record. And you can also think that at the moment, this, as I said, this situation can't go on, and that the fit hasn't quite been right for a while. He said 6 weeks. Other people can make judgments as to whether or not that's been longer. Those two thoughts aren't mutually exclusive. You can think both of those things. And increasingly, that's probably where I find myself in this debate, if I'm being really honest. So, it's a big few weeks, I think, for him, if not a big few days.
Yeah, having spoken to various friends and supporters of the club, I think this sort of perceived nature where football managers at Norwich City in the past, the Chris Hutons, the Glenn Roders of the Norwich City managerial world, typically if the football, there's no identity, there's nothing you can really get behind, or it's negative, then typically Norwich fans don't build a connection, and it only really ends one way, in my eyes anyway.
That's it. And also the style of football that they were playing earlier when they're in the season, when they were winning games, and to the point they are now, if you're going to play like that, you have to win, because if you don't win, it looks like it does at the moment. It looks broken. It's not very nice to watch, and people pay a lot of money. What is it? Is it the highest season ticket price in the Championship at the moment, as Anthony Richens said? So that's a high cost to put on a product which many people aren't very pleased with. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I've done the same. I've spoken to family members who are Norwich City fans. And to be honest, I'm yet to find one positive voice. And obviously there have been public opinions, and people have written very good pieces about why that is the case. So they are out there. But I'm finding them increasingly difficult to find, if I'm honest. And I'm sure you are as well.
Yep. Trip to Luton. Dean Smith would be quite happy that Norwich City are playing away. He sort of referenced that in the post-match press conference after the Blackburn game. But their issues in terms of creativity aren't helped Connor. No Todd Cantwell. He's been pulled out of a practice game on Tuesday, groin injury. Aaron Ramsey as well. That's another one that's concerning. He's not available for the trip to Luton. So, Connor, that begs the question, where's the creativity going to come from at Luton? Because it doesn't really feel like there's much in those sort of forward areas now for Norwich City, particularly from an attacking midfield sense.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the honest answer. I don't know where the creativity does come from. And again, I think maybe there's a willingness for us to look kind of wise after the event. But we were saying in the team news video last week, when the team dropped, that there was a lack of creativity in that team. And there was a big or a huge amount of pressure that was put onto Danel Sinani's shoulders to inject that, to provide that. And of course, the context being that he couldn't even get in a matchday squad before the World Cup break, let alone in the starting 11. So that's difficult. I think he had a tough afternoon last week, as did lots of them. But you look at the players in Norwich City's team at the moment, or that played last week: Timu Pukki, Josh Sargent, Gabriel Sara, Kenny McLean, to an extent Isaac Hayden, obviously, but he's not really someone that I would put in a offensive bracket. But certainly those 4 players that I mentioned are not players who bring creativity. They're players, certainly in Pukki, Sargent and Sarah's case, who want to be getting on the end of chances and want to be converting chances rather than are really good at the creation of chances. And without Ramsey and without Cantwell, I think we've seen this season Norwich City really struggle to do that. Onel Hernandez did come on and inject a little bit of that, to be fair to him, although I think he has found games more difficult when he started them, and I think Dean Smith has realised that. And there's also, of course, the frustrations over his productivity and his decision making. Albeit, I felt that he was one of the shining lights last week in terms of his contribution. Albeit Norwich City were already behind and went on to lose the game. So I don't know. Do you stick Onel Hernandez in there and hope that he can cause carnage from the start? Again, I think there's pros and cons to that particular argument. So in short, I don't know, but he's going to have to find a solution to that, and maybe it is reverting back to a midfield diamond or a 3-1-2, as he was keen to point out, and going to a front 2 and trying to get some joy that way. I could see that being a very plausible solution to it. Hopefully, I think I'll be absolutely gobsmacked if Liam Gibbs didn't start on Monday. If he's not in the midfield, then again, you'd have concerns about where the energy is going to come from that area of the pitch as well. So, yeah, I could. The more I think about it, the more I could see him going back to or reverting back to that 4-3-1-2 and having Sargent and Pukki as a 2 and trying to get something going through that way. But again, even in that system, I'm not too sure where the creativity comes, if I'm completely honest, particularly without Ramsey and without Cantwell as well.
Yeah, I see the comments flooding in. Keep them coming in. We'll come around to those in just a moment. But going to flip the conversation to Luton, Connor. 1 win in 7 since that win at Carrow Road. They got Carlton Morris's goal, the decisive one that evening. So just want to talk about Luton. Obviously, they've had a change of manager since then. You know, Nathan Jones has departed to Southampton. They brought in Rob Edwards from their bitter rivals, Watford, after he was obviously removed of his position earlier in the season. So, what have you made of Luton so far this season? I thought they were quite impressive at Carrow Road, albeit that I think probably the possessions and stats probably suggested that Norwich maybe should have got something out of the game. So, what are you expecting from them on Monday evening when we rock up to Kenilworth Road?
A difficult game. I really rate Rob Edwards. I think he's a fantastic young coach. Did a brilliant job at Forest Green. Obviously, wasn't afforded any time at Watford, which is common. So I don't think you can disregard his ability as a coach simply off the basis of 10 games at Watford. Might not even have been that. So no, I think it's a good appointment after Nathan Jones, who's done a stellar job there. Made Kenilworth Road a really difficult place to go, and has got Luton punching high above their weight, really, for them to obviously finish in the playoffs as they did last season. Got some excellent individual players, but as a collective, they're really effective. I felt last season they were the best pressing team in the Championship, the way that they played and harassed teams, and they were in many ways kind of an image or a reflection of Nathan Jones's character on the pitch. They were difficult, hostile, energetic. So it's going to be interesting to see how much of that Rob Edwards elects to retain and how much of it he wishes to change. I think at Forest Green, he was a bit more possession-based by all accounts. Obviously, his first game at Kenilworth Road as well. He's only had 1 game in charge because of the game that got called off last week. So he's going to be wanting to make an immediate impact and to try and make a positive first impression to supporters. So it's going to be a really difficult game for Norwich. I think Kenilworth Road is one of those kind of places, the cliche places that everyone goes, it's a really tough place to go. But it kind of feels like the game that Dean Smith would want least after what happened last weekend, I would say, and the setting that he would want least. It's obviously not a ground that Norwich City have won on since 2007, but in fairness, they've not really played there much, and they didn't win there in the last title winning campaign in Cup or League. So I think this is going to be a really tough test. I can see it being a bit of a battle of endurance, and ultimately, I won't spoil my score prediction, but I can see 2 teams probably cancelling each other out, if I'm honest. But Luton will be hoping to make the most of the vulnerabilities that Norwich have. They've done it once in this season. Carlton Morris up front is a very, very good striker at this level. So they've got players who I think can hurt Norwich. I think it's just about whether they've got their heads fully around any changes that Rob Edwards wishes to implement going forward, and whether Norwich City can catch them slightly in that lull. And as you mentioned, poor form, but also a change of coach and a change of method. So sometimes that can work against you and sometimes it can work for you. So Norwich City will be hoping that it's the latter rather than the former.
Yeah, going to delve into the comments. Twitchy Terry on YouTube saying that the staunch refusal to play a formation that actually suits the players is concerning. There's a little bit of conversation, I think, probably around January in the contracts here, Connor. Paddy did ask a few questions on that this morning. Craig Brooks on YouTube, is it not a bit concerning that we have players out of contract at the end of the season and we haven't signed any of them except McLean? If we don't go up, the finances won't be there to replace them. On that, Connor, there was obviously a link surfaced yesterday as well about one of these young players that Norwich had over sort of 3 or 4 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago now, from Cortiba. So anything in that one, Dean Smith was asked about, it didn't sort of say, he said he's not going to leave January until January. So anything in terms of contracts, are you a little bit concerned about that? And maybe what do you think Norwich City can do in the January transfer window? You know, there's Emma saying here, will Pookie be off? Because I think that's probably one of the ones that's also a little bit of concerning because it doesn't look that interested.
Yeah, I think the contracts is really is a problem, to be honest, because it does affect players and players admit that it affects them. And in Norwich City's current situation, it's not helpful. I think if there were offers that were made for players who were out of contract in the summer, that Norwich City would entertain them and would explore them. Because that's the position they're in. Either you get money for a player or they walk away for free. That's a bit of a no-brainer in that situation. And I would include Timu Pukki in that bracket as well, by the way. So again, if that happened, how do you market that? How do you communicate that to supporters? Because that will get perceived in a certain way if it happens. And there's no reason to suggest at this moment in time that it will or that it won't. But it is a concern because all of these players now are going to be free to talk to clubs abroad and sign pre-contractual agreements. So by very nature of where they are going to have to think about their future if something is presented to them. So it's not a good position to be in. It's not good for the club. It's not good for the players. It's not good for the individuals. There's no clarity. It's not good for the wider group because if I'm a player and I'm looking next to me and I'm seeing a player who has 6 months on his deal and is maybe unsure what is there beyond this season, and I've got a 3-year contract, I don't know. It becomes quite difficult, a difficult dynamic within the group, and there's always that to an extent, I think. But to have it on such a large scale and have it with such experienced group, some really experienced players who have achieved a lot at Norwich City, is not great. It's not a great look, more than anything else, even if it is imperially impacting the group on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the Brazilian, yeah, I think that's credible, that's genuine. I think I don't think it would be one to bother the first team at this stage, but Norwich City have, as we've seen, utilised the South American market. They've got a relationship with Coritiba. He's very highly rated by all accounts. I think there was some interest from Espanyol and another Brazilian club, who escapes me at this moment. So that would make sense. He's obviously been at the club as well on a trial period, so they've been able to scout him in a slightly different way. So yes, on that one. And what was the final question you asked me? January, more generally, I think Norwich will bring in one. I think it'll be a winger, and I think they'll probably have to shift two or a couple or maybe one, depending on who it is, in order to fund that. So that's all going to be very interesting, and the dynamic of it is going to be interesting. But I would imagine the fact they're looking for an attacking player in the current climate probably means that they've asked themselves the question that we've just been asking around creativity and the fact that this group probably does need an injection of it. Of course, they've got two wingers who they spent big money on, who are both out on loan as well, which is worth mentioning.
Yeah, Blakey Boy on YouTube asking who has any value, Connor. I suppose that's the issue. These players are out of contract. The likes of Timu Pukki's getting on in terms of age as well now, maybe not had his best season as well. So who in the squad actually could generate some funds if Norwich City were to go out and try and spend some money in either January or even next summer when they're maybe trying to reset things?
Well, I think it would be a loan. So in that context, would be less expensive at this stage. Obviously, depends on what they generate. If they get more than perhaps they're planning on at the moment, then obviously that would allow them in theory to go out and get a permanent signing. And it obviously depends what the player is and where the player is and what the sort of fee for the player is. But if you can generate 500,000 sales, that's £1 million. That's a very, very decent loan for the rest of the season, or it's a permanent deal, isn't it? So there's ways and means of doing it. I think that the players that are out of contract quite frankly, any money for them would be better than losing them for nothing. Obviously, the only bit is you lose them 6 months earlier than planned, and some of them are really pivotal in what Norwich City and Dean Smith are trying to do at the moment. So there's ways and means. Jordan Hugill, I wouldn't be surprised to see him as one of the players that depart. A couple of players on the fringes. I guess Todd Campbell you'd throw into that bracket now naturally as well. And there will be interest in these players, particularly given their contractual situation. And there will be some clubs who view an opportunity for them to almost beat the queue, particularly domestically, if they can view as getting these players for perhaps under maybe what they were valued a couple of years ago, but also ahead of a group of clubs being able to sign them on free transfers. So there'll be clubs who are interested in Norwich City players. I've got no worries or doubts about that. It is just about getting the right value and ensuring that the fee that is paid is good for the player and good for the club as well.
Yeah, before we talk festivities, Connor, just going to round off and get your score prediction for this one. Where you spoke at length there about the tricky trip to Kenilworth Road and maybe your thoughts on the game. So, put a score prediction in for the viewers.
Yeah, I think this will be a draw. I could actually see if I could see any team edging it, I could see Luton edging it 2-1. But I think it will be a draw. I think Norwich cannot lose this game. I think they need to win it, if I'm being completely honest. I don't think a draw does anything for Dean Smith in terms of buying time or shifting anything, but it may probably help him absolutely guarantee that he gets to Reading, which I think he will do anyway, by the way, irrespective. But certainly in terms of fan mood, I think a draw, again, not perfect, but not as bad as it could be, obviously. So I think it'll be 1-1, but as I said, to be honest, I could see a 2-1.
We might have lost Connor.
How about you, Adam? How do you see this game? There we go. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know how much of that you caught.
Yeah, no, I caught the end of it. I heard you want my score prediction. I'm with you, Connor. I'm going 1-1 as well in this one. I can see a draw being the result, and it's just, I imagine that's probably not the result that fans are going to want, because they're probably going to get frustrated at the fact that will probably be enough to keep Dean Smith in a position to go into that Reading game and potentially even the Watford one after that. But I suppose they've then got that. Well, they've got the FA Cup game and then they've got the Preston game, 2 weeks after. So that maybe gives them an opportunity. If these results don't go in the right manner, then that could be the period that the club could act and maybe get someone in for those final 20 games of the season. And with that, Connor, I suppose that's the point to round off the show. Christmas is coming. Magnus on YouTube saying, love the channel and content, guys. Wishing everyone at the Pink and a Merry Christmas. We obviously appreciate that. And with that, Connor, what are your plans for Christmas? Obviously, me and you are travelling up from Norfolk to the game on Monday now. Is it Monday? I lose track of the days with Christmas. Boxing Day. So yeah, what are your plans on Christmas Day? Are you looking forward to your turkey?
I am looking forward to it. I'm already thinking about my turkey. I've been thinking about the turkey for the last week or so, I would say. It's definitely the highlight. Just a nice quiet one, really, spent with family. That will be it. I would imagine it'll be fairly low key, but that's okay. That's fine. Lots of food, and hopefully when you see me on Boxing Day, I'll be able to fit into the car. That's the plan, although I'm slightly worried. But we'll see. What about you? What are your plans for Christmas, Adam? How are you going to spend the day, I suppose?
Yeah, I've got a trip down with my grandparents. There's quite a few of us going down there for Christmas Day, which should be really, really nice. Obviously, we've had sort of issues with COVID in recent years and not being able to get together. So sort of being everyone back under the same roof and enjoying Christmas Day, and obviously everything it brings is great. And sort of seeing family, faces when they open up presents you've bought them that maybe they don't expect. That's always the best bit. And then we'll wait about, we'll leave the football down the side. If Norwich City can get us a nice result on Boxing Day, and obviously that just lifts the mood even more. And with that, I think we'll round off the show. Jordan as well saying appreciate for getting the press conference up this morning and great coverage. Happy Christmas. That probably leads me to say, if you haven't watched the press conference yet this morning, then that's a good place to go right now. Dean Smith's comments ahead of this trip to Luton, and obviously all the sort of fallout from the Blackburn game is all covered in that one. My terrace talk is up with the Luton fan from yesterday. That's well worth a watch as well. He gives sort of all the insight in what's happened at Luton since that game at Canaries Road. So that's well worth a watch. Lots of great content, and obviously as usual across our channels. You've got Chris Sutton's column, obviously the recent podcast. If you've not had a chance to go and listen to that, then delve into that. And as I just said, me and Connor will be travelling up from Norfolk. Sam is coming from his home, and Paddy's from London. So we'll all be at Kenilworth Road on the Monday night for the very cold, I can imagine, evening at at Luton, which is what better way to be spending your Boxing Day evening really than watching Norwich City at Luton. That's the best way. That's the best way to be. So if you're making the trip to Luton, safe trip. Obviously shortest trip of the season so far, albeit it's still nearly 2 hours away, which just sums up where we are in the location sense. Looking forward to it. Hopefully Norwich City can provide some festive cheer, and with that, happy Christmas. Thanks for watching our content so far this year. Obviously it'll be the Reading stuff, but we really appreciate all the support across our channel. So yeah, thanks for the support. Continue support. If you're not a Pink and Plus subscriber, why aren't you? That's obviously the best question. Free trial, $1.99 a month thereafter. That's the place to go for all your Norwich City content. And with that, we'll round off the show. Thanks for joining us this Friday lunchtime. Happy Christmas. Enjoy your time with your family, and we'll see you at Luton on Monday evening.